I heard, for example, that one time you even collapsed from exhaustion in the middle of the street. Which sounds insane, right? Hopefully you're okay now.
I'm fine.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, in 2015, you started Farewill, which uses technology to innovate the will writing and funeral planning sectors. Since launching, you've built the company to over 50 people, you've won a ton of awards, and you've raised over 1 billion for charity by people leaving pledged donations in their wills, which is an amazing story, right? So what advice would you give to others who are looking to, start that journey? They've got an idea for a business, maybe they've just started building something. Looking back a couple of years ago to when you were setting up Farewill, what advice, what insights would you have given yourself?
Oh, such a good question. It so depends on how old you are and what you're looking to get out of the experience. I think for anyone doing it for the first time, the only advice that I'd give them is don't do it. Don't do it unless you're really sure that you want to work unbelievably hard. You can't just dip your toe in the water. And often, or sometimes have the pleasure of speaking to students who are doing entrepreneurial courses or that sort of thing. And I'm really going hard being like, don't do this. Don't do this. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. If you choose to raise VC funding, or you're trying to actually work on something very challenging, you're signing up for a long-term commitment that comes with really significant sacrifices. And so my first advice would be don't do it unless you're kind of built like that, and you really want to, you love working hard and you want to spend most of your life doing that. Yeah. I think the second thing, if you do want to work like that, is to just do it and not worry about being in the perfect industry. Sometimes I'll meet people who say, I'm looking around for the right opportunity and they can do that until they're 50. I think it does get harder if you get the kind of golden handcuffs on. I got to do it straight out of university. So my annual income at the time was like £4. So it's not a lot to give up. I am often surprised that people don't scan around at all to see what the competitive landscape is like. So there's two different. It depends what someone's background is like. I think you can get people coming from finance or coming from kind of professional services industries who don't think about a product experience enough, and they just think, oh, here's a macro opportunity. Kind of comps and exit multiples are good in this industry, so I'm going to start a business here. Yeah. You equally get people from the background more that I'm from, which is kind of creative industries and design, who will start a business and it's all product experiences, all the human side of what they're building, but their price point is a quarter of what it'll cost them to make the product, and you just haven't kind of added those two things together. So I think you need a bit of rationality on both ends. Is there a big enough business that can be built in this space? Yeah. Are they, and then also is there a cut through opportunity for building a differentiated product experience that you can realistically bring to life? I think the final factor is, what are the tailwinds? Okay. There is absolutely no substitute to just working in a growing industry. Yeah. There is nothing like it. Yeah, if you're going to start a business right now, start it in AI, start it in Web3. Yeah. Do not start a retail shop selling coffee unless you've got some crazy USP. Yeah. You need to be riding a wave, don't you, to have the best shot of succeeding. I completely agree with what you said around golden handcuffs. I did 5 years for a big corporate, so leaving like a 6-figure salary to go to zero again, it would have been so much easier for me to have done that right away. But then again, I wouldn't have had the experience and skills to do what I do. So it's quite rare to find people like you that just go for it right away from the outset. You mentioned around raising VC money there. You've raised several million from investors to make this business happen. A lot of people that we speak to really struggle with doing pitches, with getting investors on board, with securing that capital to get the idea going. What tips would you give on looking to raise money? Yeah, great question. So we've raised about £28 million so far, and from a mixture of angel investors, seed funds, and then later stage VCs. And I think there's probably a few bits of advice that I'd give. I'm a bit unusual in that I absolutely love that part of the process. I think you get some founders who don't like raising money. Yeah. For me, it's me and my element. I love the sales process, and I get so excited as I go through it. I get excited talking. This is quite tragic after almost a decade. I get excited talking about the company. I get excited talking about the opportunity. The first step in the process for me is I lock myself in a room and go absolutely nuts for probably 3 months trying to completely perfect the story. Okay. I've rewritten decks for fundraising probably upwards of 50 times in one fundraising process, like start to finish, every side of the deck, and then be like, no, it's not quite good enough. Okay. And I think it's useful to go through the process so many times of asking yourself, what is the story here? Is this really cohesive and cuts through? And then when you get to the next stage of, it's like Dragon's Den. You don't want to be there saying, I don't know what it cost me to make a pencil or something. Yeah. So you need to know every number in the business in order that you can kind of forget it and relax. And if I'm talking about the story of our company, I often just, it's really satisfying to get to that level of comfort with the type of story that you're trying to tell, that it just becomes fun. And if you're enjoying it, the person on the other side of the table just picks up on your enthusiasm for the industry. I think lots of people will focus on a pitch being slick rather than it being interesting. Yeah. And that people are going to remember maybe 2 or 3 things that you say, and how are you going to bring those things to life, which might be about how the market's moving, how traction in the business is going, something that a customer said about your business. So that's one side of it, is actually the pitch process. I've written if I get the first slide of a deck right, the rest of it takes me an hour to write. Okay. And if the first slide is wrong, it's all just like flowing out of the wrong place. How do you actually frame the category that you're in or the challenge that you're working on right from the get-go? Yeah. And if you do that right, you'll send decks to people and they'll just take meetings. They'll take meetings, or they'll be really excited about it. They'll bring partners to it straight away. The other things that matter are first impressions. First impressions are just unbelievably important in anything. And a lot of that comes down to how you can get introduced to someone. Like most VCs won't take just kind of random inbound submissions. So finding someone who can introduce you to a partner in a VC fund is you're already in the top kind of 10%, and then thinking about how do you explain your own background and why you're sitting in that chair opposite someone else. Why is this the most important thing that you could be doing with your time? And if you start the meeting well, the rest is all just academic. Yes. But if you start it on the wrong foot, you're dead. Yeah. And the other thing that people forget is that you're prepping the person on the other side of the table to go away and have an internal conversation. You're prepping for them, best case scenario, to go and sell to their own partners, because ultimately they're managing someone else's money. Yes. They go and raise money from external investors or pension funds or Saudi wealth fund or whatever it is, and they're promising those people a return on their cash, and they want to spend the money. VCs get paid when they spend the money, and they also get highly paid when they make profit. So they are looking for good companies. But the person on the other side of the table is going to be your biggest advocate, and you're preparing them to go and relay the unique insights that you have about your sector to their other partners, and say, we've found one in a 1,000 company that we should back. So it's good to think not just about the person in front of you, but about the conversation that they're going to have next as well.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by welovealpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to welovealpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now. Yeah, getting them on your side, getting them to be your stakeholder, your salesperson. Yeah. Okay. It's great that you've identified that you're good at that part of the job.
I just said I enjoy it.
You enjoy it?
I'm good
okay.
at it. I enjoy it.
Well, you've got good results, so I will say that you're good at that part of the job, right? You said something interesting on the Founders for Good podcast. You said my job is not to be good at the things that I'm bad at. My job is to hire the right people who are better than me at those areas. It was a while back, so I'll repeat that, okay? My job is not to be good at the things that I'm bad at. My job is to hire the right people who are better than me at those areas, which I completely agree with.
I'm so delighted it wasn't a quote I now disagree with. Okay, yeah.
Well, what was important to you when hiring and building a team? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's often what I think about is, I think when I was a greener manager, I used to think about, okay, well, are they, 7 out of 10 good enough at a bunch of these different things? And I say especially with leaders in the business, you need people who are highly competent. And there are, over time, things have surprised me as kind of common modes of not being, there are types of competence that you need at a leadership level in a company that are just, you can't get around it if you don't have it. Numeracy, just because kind of actually good, logical, structured thinking and a high level of basic numeracy is one that sometimes surprises you. You can meet someone who's 15 years into their career or 20 years into their career and then get 6 months down the line of working with them and realize you're just not on the same page in terms of how you structure your thinking. And then communication, just brevity and simplicity in communication. Jenny, who's our COO, is just the most fantastic communicator. She naturally synthesizes information, simplifies it, and then just goes forwards on whatever it is that she's trying to do. It's incredible. It's like I read this book, this biography of Napoleon, and I was just sending Jenny just pictures of almost every page, quotes from Napoleon that were like, who said this? Was it Jenny Zhao? Was it Napoleon? And so the question is, what do you look for when you're hiring people? I think over time I moved from kind of assessing general competencies to being like, what is this person incredible at? And are they, and then to dial that thing up to 11. And the rest of it, you just have to put the right support mechanisms around, or to have the right process to kind of counterbalance the stuff that they're not as strong at, and myself included. Yeah. And I've kind of learned that there are some roles where you want to have absolute generalists. So it's not necessarily the most important thing that they're incredible at one thing. But in most roles, I've found we pretty much only hire generalists. We don't have any very specialist roles in the business, and we hire people who are really good, quick, logical thinkers and very good brief communicators. And that overall general velocity and interoperability of people in the organization has led to a massive increase in organizational speed. Okay. There are probably other business challenges where you want someone with unbelievable degrees of technical expertise, like building AI models or something like that. I'm not going to get very far doing that. And then in terms of managing people, identifying, working with the person that you're managing to really ascertain where they want to go and what this thing is that they're incredible at. That I find is the most satisfying part of working with someone or managing them is seeing someone else realize that they're incredible, that they're incredible at something, rather than I'm not a very good manager in terms of, if they're not so good at something, developing that thing, that's less of my strength.
Okay, and it's an amazing feeling when you see somebody who perhaps didn't know they had that skill at the level that you then see it get demonstrated, and then they flourish and develop and smash it out the park. Yeah. It's like the most rewarding feeling in the world as a leader. Yeah, definitely. But
I've got a lot of thoughts about hiring. I was taught a kind of hiring methodology by someone called Michelle Coventry, who was part of our seed investors. They were a kind of a partner there, and she's like one of the top talent people in Europe. And probably when there was 3 or 4 of us in the company, took me and my co-founder and taught us how to run a really good hiring process, how to interview people, how to write great job specs, how to make job offers. And it was, I still think it's the most transformative thing that I've ever learned. And it's funny when you see people starting companies and there are these kind of bland or vanilla job specs, and you might be hiring a COO or like a C-level executive or something really important, and you think, this ad is terrible. Yes. Like, it's absolutely terrible. You're trying to hire a 1 in 1,000 leader who probably already has an incredible job paying more than what you want to offer them, and you're not even going to bother to make this job ad the most exciting thing you've ever seen. So it's a really weird one. Obviously, you're busy building the company, but those getting the right people in place is it's so trite. Everyone says it every time, but like if you get the people right, everything else just kind of takes care of itself. Yeah. And I still think that despite everyone knowing that, people don't put in enough effort. And I'm guilty of not putting enough effort sometimes as well.
I mean, everybody talks about it, but very few people actually take the necessary actions to make it happen. Like I know you've mentioned there you are obsessing over the quality of the job ad. I know for a while you were like open sourcing like the hiring like process or like the values or something you had on your website.
Oh yeah.
And you know, all of that like cultural information is so important when speaking to new recruits.
Yeah.
We touched upon earlier about the stresses and the difficulty of building a business, and this can like really impact leaders and founders within companies. I heard, for example, that one time you even collapsed from exhaustion in like the middle of the street. Which sounds insane, right? Hopefully you're okay now.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always thought that burnout was for the weak, and I really prided myself on the ability to just do a lot of hours. Yeah. And I still do. I work really hard. I definitely think there's no way to do this unless you like working really, very, very hard. So anyway, I don't think the burnout has anything to do with working hard or working a certain number of hours. I think it comes from just, you're desperately trying to move something in the business and you can't do it. It's like you're banging your head against the wall and it's exhausting. Yeah. But I just didn't really kind of read any of the warning signs about it. And then collapse is probably a bit strong, but I came out of a meeting and I'd just been working just endlessly for months. This is probably 5 years ago, and kind of just like, felt a bit. I think I just like fell over. I was with my COO, my old COO at the time, and it wasn't. I didn't like smash my head on the floor, but I thought, okay, fine. My body's telling me to pump the brakes here. Right. And I think lots of founders and CEOs that I know have memory problems, which is quite interesting because you get how someone else explained it to me was you get flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, which kind of lights your brain up and makes you on the spot great at sales or whatever it is that the challenge of the day that needs to be solved, but it trashes your memory. So I know loads of people who struggle with kind of feeling present day to day if they're not under loads of stress or kind of have memory problems there's all number of kind of comorbidities that come with running a business.
Sure. So since that happened, what have you done to, I guess, avoid that happening again? What advice would you give to people on avoiding burnout?
On avoiding burnout, I don't know if you can. I think the best solution to avoiding burnout is for your business to be working, because there's been times when I think, I need a break, but you can't take a break, and all you're doing is increasing the severity of the stress that you're under by not working to actively solve the problem. So plan A for resolving burnout is the business works, and there's no better medicine, which is not necessarily helpful advice. And then all those things like exercise and meditation and whatever are helpful, but I know I do all of those things. I love cycling. I've been meditating for like 10 years, and I can still get unbelievably worked up and be doing all of those things at the same time. If you're someone who likes winning and is used to winning, the feeling of not winning is like unbearable. So I'd just say the main solution is to win.
It's true though, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know anyone I haven't met anyone who's like, oh, you know what, actually, this is the thing that I do, and I figure out if I do these 3 things, then I'm not going to get burnt out. Some people I know are just less neurotic and obsessive, and they're a bit more stoic about the whole thing. But then I think it's just your personality basically, and I happen to be quite highly strung. Yeah. I
struggle to, I guess, switch off would be the word, right? Like a holiday for me is email with a beach in the background sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've managed to figure this out a little bit better than I have.
It just sounds like we should go on holiday together. That comes down to the people side of things as well. Going on holiday with amazing people in the business when the business is going well is absolutely fine. Yeah. And also it's a matter of time. Like when I started the business, I was less experienced. I was just way more worried about spending any time away from it. And now it's something that I find easier to do. So I think it's just a bit of a maturity thing as well. But again, it's the same thing. If the business is going well, then taking time away from it is fine. Yeah.
Okay. So you have appeared on ITV's This Morning, on BBC Morning, on the Secret Leaders podcast, and many others. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs on, I guess, speaking and overcoming imposter syndrome? Because it's something that everyone seems to feel, or 99% of people feel imposter syndrome, and it holds them back. And then very few people go, nah, forget about it, and they just do it anyway. How do you do it anyway? How do you overcome imposter syndrome?
I don't think I've had imposter syndrome in the past from hearing friends describe it. Yeah. I have a real problem with perfectionism, so I get unbelievably stressed about almost anything until I feel like it's at a good enough standard. So I get really worried I'm not going to do a good job, particularly the first time doing live TV. Like, doing live TV is, and you're wandering out there just thinking about all the different things that can go wrong. I find if the stage is big, I'm always really stressed before I go on it. I've got like almost 10 years of experience of doing this stuff, and I'm always, even if I'm doing all hands in our own company, I'll be kind of like, I'll try and do a good job. But I think that's because I care about doing a good job. Yeah. I think I'm lucky that my brain focuses on trying to do something well, rather than being like, I don't deserve to be here. In my experience, as soon as the lights go on, for some reason my brain just kicks into gear, and then I find it fun and relaxing. But the time beforehand is unbearable. Yeah. So I'm giving absolutely no practical advice on any one of these different things, other than it just sucks and you have to weather the storm over and over again. Yeah.
You just have to do it, basically.
Yeah, that's why people say resilient. I just think resilience is the most important thing to focus on. I don't think there are many ways to make it less bad. I think there's just ways to. I think you just have to get used to tolerating endless problems. The number of times when I've said to myself, "This is rock bottom." Something's gone catastrophically wrong, and then something else, and I've been like, "Well, at least this is what rock bottom feels like." And then you just find out another kind of sea floor. But it all just makes you stronger, and then I think you're able to deal with just a wider range of stressful situations, and you're able to put the accelerator down harder in the business and test its limits further, because you've got to withstand those sorts of problems.
Yeah, it's pouring it down outside. You can't control the rain, but you get better at holding the umbrella, for lack of a better expression. Yeah. Okay, cool. Being frugal as an entrepreneur can be really important, especially in the early days. For example, you ate the same baguette with spinach every single day. Why do you think it's important to have this frugal mindset as a founder?
Well, at the time it was fiscally important because me and my co-founder were each paid just not very much money, which we did probably until 5 years into the business. After we'd raised, over £10 million, we kept our pay really low, and we could afford to do it because we were young, we didn't have kids, stuff like that. It's really interesting actually, because I used to listen to podcasts like How I Built This and like lots of startup-y podcasts that focus on the companies that were sort of successful 2017, 2018, people raising kind of mega giant rounds. Yeah. And it's all of it was about talent density and empowered product teams and whatever. None of it was on cost control. Mm. And I actually got really sick of listening to those podcasts. And one of the main ones that I listen to at the moment is this podcast called Founders that
I love Founders.
Yeah, which is fantastic, and it's basically just like biographies, and biographies of people from Estee Lauder to the guy who started Dunkin' Donuts and everyone. And you realise that the common thread isn't that they were obsessive about talent density or they were obsessive about whatever it was. They were obsessive about cost control, like really often crazy. About how they were controlling costs inside the business, and that's how they developed their competitive advantages. And there are different ways of doing that, but our business has been a lot bigger in the past. Like through the pandemic, we raised a lot of money, we grew the team. There was probably 150, 160 people in the business, and then we downsized it. We had a kind of very serious spike in demand. Obviously, people were worried about dying, and the death rate actually went up. Yeah. Now our business is 66 FTEs and is double the size that it was in 2021. So it's less than half the size of the headcount, and it's more than double the size of revenue, and the velocity is probably, without exaggerating, I would say 4 or 5 times faster in terms of product velocity and in terms of just our average time to getting anything done. And we're quite horribly understaffed, I would say. Like, it's stressful. It's not plain sailing. Like, every day we have teams that are stressed, and that is sort of where I want the business to be. We have high performing people who thrive in that kind of environment, who are up for a bit of stress, and then take a lot of satisfaction out of doing things that weren't obviously possible. And I would never want to run a business in a different situation again. It forces you to prioritize, and I wasn't trying to make a point by eating that sandwich, El Clasico, is what me and Tom called this sandwich. I wasn't trying to make a point. That was literally it took very little time, and it cost next to no money, and I am just really frugal in my own life. Sure. It's quite a weird vibe when you start having people, executives in the business or whatever, who are very flashy or paid loads of money or living ostentatiously, or you're starting to do those sorts of things inside a company. I think there are some benefits that definitely make sense, like having a really nice office. If you don't have a nice office, then it's pretty difficult to get people to want to come in. And if you don't, if occasionally we'll get people lunch and stuff like that, and it's just a nice vibe at work. So it's worth spending some money, but it's important to, if particularly in consumer services, every pound that we save as a business is a pound that we can return to our customers, which allows us to grow our market share. So it's frugal strategically rather than frugal just to make a point. Yes. Yeah.
But the reason it's not on all of those podcasts is because it's less sexy to talk about, saving money, cutting costs, as opposed to just spending crazy amounts of other people's cash to try and capture the market before anybody else does, right? But you're right. I was just listening to the Rolex episode of Founders.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Sorry, we are so in sync, and it just came out the other day, right? And the amount of cash that he saved in the early days of, he was literally buying other people's watches and then putting the logo on them and everything. It was basically every entrepreneur that's achieved something massive and great, they had to go through that grind to get there, with the exception of perhaps the Googles and the Amazons that just had a different route to market and business model, right? Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's the reason why it's not talked about as much. But I think the other reason, really, Dan, is that people struggle just to do that. Like they get a little bit of money and they're like, okay, great. Forget the baguette with spinach. I'm going for the BLT. I'm going for the whole shebang. And then it becomes really, really hard because there's little transactions every day. They add up to being the cash that you would have had to make the first hire, or to spend it on that marketing campaign, or to do this or to do that. So why do you think people struggle to have the self-discipline needed to sacrifice now and take the short-term hit for the long-term gain? I think it's just lack of experience, and then it's also all the kind of signalling of, the majority of press releases you see in startup are, we just raised £1 billion, like hooray, this is fantastic. And obviously those are huge milestones for businesses. But if I go back in time and think through the different raises that we've done, where the message to our team internally and via the press was like, fantastic, we've raised 20 million quid. Yeah. The message should have been, I've got some terrible, terrible news for you. We've raised loads of money. Now we have to go 5 times faster, and we're going to have to do it on less resources because we're closer to having some sort of exit event or floating the business. Like, you thought this was hard before. We're halfway up a mountain and the next bit is steeper. Yeah. This is very bad news for all of you that we've raised this money. And instead, it's just a completely different tone. Hooray, the magic money tree's grown some more money. No, this is getting increasingly serious. People are going to get let go who don't make it to the next stage of the process. The talent bar is rising, the pressure's rising, the heat is rising. We're going to have to do more with less and go faster across all of those different vectors. That should be the message when you raise money, not, oh, this is great, now we can all just chill out because we've got through this next sprint. Yes. And since I started the business, there was a kind of amazing bull run in venture funding, and I don't regret that at all. I was there at the right time, but it did establish some funny incentives. Yeah.
created weird reflexes and behaviors in the venture industry. And right now, so many companies are doing trade sales, completely going out of business, recapping, and it's not hard to see why. It's very, very difficult to turn a company around from just being growth at all costs to being profitable. And we spent 2 years doing that. It was very hard. It had full cultural change, strategic change, focus on our margins. It was very difficult. And it's that there's a Charlie Munger thing about, if you want to look at how an organization behaves, and just look at the incentive structure and the incentive structure for at least a few years. And my VCs are not guilty of this. They're seriously experienced operators who understand the exit market, but still there was a bit of, okay, well, if we hit these top line figures just in the general market, then that's great. You don't need to think about bottom line. So I think that's where it all comes from. It's very difficult to say to your team, no, we have to do more with less. If they can say, well, why don't you just go and raise some more money? It's really easy to do.
Love the Charlie Munger reference. Rest in peace to our dear friend Charlie. I don't know if you saw the Founders episode where they were interviewing him over dinner, but that was incredible. Was it the only podcast he's ever done?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Then my favourite one of those is Rose Blumpkin. Have you ever listened to that?
Yeah, I probably, but I've listened to so many.
Warren Buffett's favourite entrepreneur. Okay. This absolutely crazy woman from, I think, Odessa or Minsk, who ran this kind of discount furniture warehouse, and just I think my favourite entrepreneur of all time, having listened to that. Yeah.
You mentioned a few times around doing less with more with less just then, and we have seen that over the past 18 months with Twitter firing a big chunk of their workforce, and then all the other tech companies from Meta to Amazon to Google copying, and the results and the market share and the valuations are continuing to skyrocket and go up and up, despite having a much smaller workforce. Which you've done on a different degree, but achieving more with less. And I really hope and feel like that is going to be what continues to be the market sentiment moving forward, because as a fully bootstrapped founder, it's a little bit annoying to see people that have raised all this money, but they're losing money every single month, and that gets a headline, right, in TechCrunch or whatever, right? Whereas I prefer, or at least I appreciate the organic growth of trying to hit profitability as quickly as possible, reinvesting that money back into the business and that sort of thing. But doing more with less, do you agree with me that that's hopefully going to stick around and that's a good thing?
Definitely. I think depending on the growth rate of a company, it almost should be getting smaller every year unless your growth rate is above a certain rate. And even in the time since I started the business, software development is such a different practice. There's a lot of tech companies and software companies where the difficult bit about building the technology isn't the software engineering. It isn't necessarily a complicated engineering challenge. It's more the artistry of how you put a business together so that the data is right, the velocity is really high, and you can build stuff on top of it, and you're not creating something that's really difficult to maintain. So I think that kind of craftsmanship of building a modern, flexible tech stack that allows you to respond really quickly and change things and test things is a kind of a different challenge to lots of software engineering challenges 10 years ago. Yeah. And I think that naturally means that you need smaller teams with better quality of communication rather than lots of teams, because there was just so much technical work to do. Frankly, I love that stuff of it's just more fun working in a small team. Getting something done is just so much more satisfying. And then you have all these different tools around it that help people to massively increase their impact. Yeah. So we've built lots of tools internally to allow each person who is customer facing in our team to, on average, handle 10 times the number of customers than our competitors do. And that's, most of it isn't AI. We've last 6 months started building some quite interesting AI tools, relatively simple ones, into our software. But it's basically just having really good workflows and no silver bullets, just week on week making little changes to our technology and to our processes to allow people to deliver incredible quality of service with very, very low effort. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned AI a couple of times there. We've spoken about AI over email. What are your thoughts on the technology? Are we all going to be, living in a utopian future, or is it going to be the end of the world? Where's AI heading?
I think it's truly, truly terrifying, and I'm astonished that the more people don't hold that view. I'm 1,000 times more concerned about AI and the future of humanity than I would be about climate change or nuclear war or anything. And I really mean 1,000. And then it's also really exciting and really fun, and I use it every day for everything. Some of the things that I worry about are, people say, well, what impact does it really have on our lives? Well, okay, the average person that you see looks at their phone for 5 hours a day. And in China, for some demographics, it's 7 or 8 hours a day. And most of the content that's being consumed is short form videos, where people used to think that if in the YouTube algorithm, AI would help you to find the content that you want to watch. Whereas actually what it's done is inform content creators about the type of content that hijacks your brains. Little silly dances and colourful things. And then content creators, which is the #1 job that kids want to do in the whole world, create this content that is hijacked and hardwired into people's brains, and everyone spends 7 or 8 hours a day watching it. So already AI has monopolized the half of your waking hours during the day to watch a bunch of stupid crap.
Already. And we've just started.
We've literally just started, and people are saying, how's AI going to change anything? It's completely transformed the day-to-day life of almost everyone who's a teenager in their 20s or early 30s. The average person I know has no attention span, myself included. Like we have an absolute attention crisis, which then leads to people being really dissatisfied in their lives, not able to focus on things, not able to kind of build relationships with each other, because you've just got this kind of dopamine cycle of everything so exciting on your phone. So I think that is really terrifying and increasingly terrifying. And then the other thing that I always get really distressed by is I think there's multiple phases to this. I think people talk about, well, is it really intelligent? And it draws a hand and it has 6 fingers on it. It must be so dumb. And I think the rubric for defining intelligence is completely out of whack, where people are comparing it to this human style of intelligence. If worms ruled the world and they were looking at human, they'd say, what a stupid human can't dig a hole, or whatever it is that worms like to do. And we're looking at this, it's put 6 fingers on a hand. If intelligence is your ability to process information and do something vaguely useful with it, we're not I know this sounds really lame, but we're not the apex predator anymore. There is something that can do that so much faster, that is an unbelievably readily available tool today, and this is day 0 in terms of development of that technology. It doesn't take tons of computational power once the model is built, so it's not like nuclear weapons in that you can actually control some like materials that are hard to get hold of. So I think we're about to enter a horrific phase of cyber security problems, and it's already starting. Like if you look at all of the leading indicators of cybersecurity issues, they're massively, massively up. So fraud and cyber stuff is going to become a real issue. Then that on a kind of corporate and international level, I think is going to get really, really dangerous. And I think that's going to be dovetailed with this kind of general... One thing I think is great about being a human is that we're really creative. And I used to think maybe AI won't crack creativity. I think that ship has already sailed. Yeah. Music makes great music, and can make great art, can write things that are genuinely moving and synthesize. If you have great writers who've read all this different stuff and they've compiled their ideas and they have their interesting experience, well, how about you multiply that by 1 million and you read every book that's ever written, you can synthesize that stuff in different ways. Like, we're doomed there. And I worry about people's motivation to do anything in a world where we're not the most intelligent thing on earth in terms of information processing, and we also are creatively second rate compared to the volume and quality of work that an AI can do. So I'm really worried about a kind of downgrading of the human spirit. And then on the kind of final stages of it, there's all kind of manner of like terrifying sci-fi things to consider. And I think it is like a pretty intractable problem relatively intractable to design something if worms were trying to design a piece of technology to keep humans at bay, I think they'd have quite a tough time. Sure. So I don't know if that's actually possible. And then I'm only 50% confident this stuff is going to go horribly wrong. Yeah. But I'm only X% confident that something terrible is going to happen with climate change,
Yeah.
but the level of catastrophe could be complete eradication of humans. And again, I know that makes me look like a crazy nut job, but that's what's at stake. No matter what the percentage is, it's like the potential for catastrophe and for eradication of the wonderful things that make being human so special is like truly terrifying.
I'm with you, man. I lay in bed thinking about this stuff at night.
Yeah.
I mean, the number is not zero, is it? Like, in terms of the percentage that AI could end the world, the number's not zero. So what is the number? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? I don't think anyone really knows, and that's the scary part. It could be 100%, and we don't know. One thing that the big question when it comes to AI, right, is, I've asked this many times before on the podcast, but is consciousness in the way that we have consciousness uniquely biological? Or if we give enough computing power and enough GPUs to something, does it wake up? Does it become self-aware? I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that question, but from a gut feeling, what do you think? Do you think it will wake up?
I'd say I think you just inevitably end up in a kind of semantic discussion about what consciousness is.
So
it's a tough question to answer, but my inclination to the question of, could you have something that massively supersedes humans' experience to think freely or to feel things? 100%. That feels like absolutely logical. And to the question about what the percentage is, it depends on the time frame, but I see it as very difficult for that number to not be pretty much 100% on a long enough time frame. I can't imagine how it won't happen, honestly, unless we experience some kind of medieval technological regression. And I hold out hope that will be a complete nirvana of everyone having a great time and it'll be really fun and interesting. I just can see so many different ways for it to go wrong rather than for it to go right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, if it did go wrong, and if we became the apes and AI became the humans, right? You know that ending well because you deal with the business of death. Okay. As somebody that spends their time speaking with and operating in that world, what do you think makes a life well lived?
Oh, great question. How interesting. Well, I don't know, and it's so individual, but I think there's probably a couple of different bits to. I think that's sort of your life's work in a way. Is to figure out what your own answer to that question is. It's a pretty difficult one. Otherwise, we'd be able to read a book or learn that at school, how to lead a great life, rather than spending the average day wondering if you're doing it right or wrong. And I think having the opportunity to ask that question of yourself is really lucky in the first place. There's loads of people who just don't necessarily have that.
Yeah, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about where to get food from.
Exactly. So I'd say, but if you have the chance to ask that question, then I would say it's giving that a good crack at saying, well, what does that mean for me, and then doing that at the kind of in the most full on way that you can. And if that's like having a family, then great. That is a great answer to what's life all about.
Be the best dad in the world.
Exactly.
Really go for it.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty unavoidable one from a biological level and a social level. And if you chat to anyone who's got kids and say, how do you feel about having kids? Yeah, it's really hard. Obviously, loads of people say it's really hard, really difficult. But people just love their kids so much. It makes sense that they love their kids so much. And I think to one level, it's like, well, focusing on getting as much, love into your life as possible is a great way to spend your time. And that can be in community stuff. It can be loving your work. It can be partners and kids. That's a pretty safe bet, I'd say. And then I do think the right amount of struggle is quite a necessary component, because you can get a bit bored or unchallenged, or I think you need to be stressed and sad and whatever to appreciate other things like that. Yeah, so it's so individual, and people have the value system of what they're going to treat as important in their life relative to everyone else who's around them. Sure. And I think that's why that challenge is getting increasingly difficult. If you're a caveman and pretty much the only social vector for competition is like, do I have the biggest cave or whatever it might be, the biggest club? Like, fair enough, you're going to be somewhere on a pecking order that probably isn't completely unpalatable. Now no one's looking at the size of the cave next door. It's just you're exposed from unbelievably early age to every possible vector of competition, and only really seeing the very successful side of it in terms of work and looks and social following or whatever. And this is not a novel point at all, but you know, whenever people say, "Oh, mental health is terrible in Gen Z or whatever," I think, yeah, it is terrible, and it makes absolute evolutionary sense why it's terrible, because your brain rewards you for successful competition, and the playing field has gone from your local village or what's around a kitchen table to the entire world, only filtered by the most beautiful, successful people. It's a hellscape.
And it's happened in 5-10 years.
Yeah, and it's AI powered. It's literally an AI powered hellscape that is like ruining people's sense of self-worth. Yeah, which is why I have I don't have any social media apart from LinkedIn, which I'm addicted to. Strava as well. That's pretty much the only apps I look at. So I think it's a really, really interesting challenge. And again, when you talk to anyone who's got kids about how they let their kids interact with technology, it's like it's the main issue of the age for parents.
Oh, absolutely, man. I've got a 1.5-year-old, right, and we don't really give him technology. He's 1 year old, but if he watches something on TV, it's so easy to see how addictive it is. Like it's like the content's being filtered through an algorithm to be as enticing as possible, with all the colours and changing every couple of seconds. And it's like watching a TikTok video, but it's half an hour long and it's designed for children. It's crazy. But separate topic. Dan, that's been amazing. It's been great to get your insights on everything from building a company to raising investment to challenges and dealing with stress and burnout and mental health along the way, and then tips for overcoming imposter syndrome to your predictions on the future of AI and beyond, right? If people have enjoyed this and they want to learn more about your business, what's the website? Where should they go to?
Just farewill.com, which is like farewell with an I, and everything about the business is on there. I realise I haven't spoken about it very much, but it's been a pleasure to be here today, and thanks for having me.
What's the one social network that you said, LinkedIn? What's your name on LinkedIn?
Just my name on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. It's been amazing.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., and I'll see you in the next episode.